This is an interview with Dachlan Cartwright, and I'd like to begin by asking you, Dachlan, where and when were you born?
Uh, in 1942, December the 24th, 5 minutes before Christmas Day. I was a war baby and I was born in Wales, although my parents lived in Liverpool, Birkenhead near Liverpool, because of the Merseyside Blitz. And some pregnant mothers were moved out to the Welsh countryside, the safer Welsh countryside, to avoid the bombing. And my mother was one of those. So I was born a Welshman because of Adolf Hitler.
And Welsh culture still has significance for you, doesn't it?
Very much. I was brought up in Wales. I went to school in Wales, and I still enjoy Welsh poetry. I have still contact with some of my school friends, and I really admire the Welsh culture, which is remarkable for a nation of 3 million people.
And when did you move back to Liverpool?
In 1962, I was accepted at Liverpool University for a 3-year course in political science. So I was there for the rise of the Beatles, which was when history was beginning to be made at that time
Did,
and that place.
did you actually go to the cavern?
Yes, several times.
Was that
Uh,
really exciting?
Very much so. Um, you could sense there was something special about the Beatles. The place, of course, was very tightly packed, very small. There was a distinct smell, and an unmistakable smell. And my first impression of the Beatles was they were very casual, not like, say, the leading group at the time in Britain, Cliff Richard and the Shadows, who were choreographed, but the Beatles just shuffled on stage and they would chat with the fans and smoke. Uh, but once they started playing, wow, it was amazing.
Good. And at what point did you find out about Subud? How did you join Subud?
Well, as a teenager, I studied yoga in Wales. And when I went to Liverpool, I had access to a fabulous municipal library called the Picton Library and a religion and philosophy section. There were books on Gurdjieff, Uspensky, and Subud. And I, at first, was more interested in Gurdjieff and Uspensky, their theories, but there was an address of Subud Liverpool. As you know, Seward had entered Britain in 1957 with the events around Cool Springs, the healing of Eva Bartok, and it had then spread all around the world, including in Britain, Liverpool. So it was quite a substantial group, not a big group, but I'd say about 20 or 30 members.
Good. And but you weren't only interested in Subud, were you? You're quite interested in other movements of
Yeah.
the time. For instance, going on the road. You kind of went on the road, didn't you?
Yes, let me try and go to review the timetable. So we're in, first of all, in 63. Um, I was opened in October 63. Uh, I'd read about Subud and it seemed to me the real thing as opposed to, say, the theories of Gurdjieff and Uspensky. But nothing happened on my opening, nothing, no vibration, no movement. I kept on going, soldiering on, and even visited Coombe Springs in that very cold winter of 1962 to 63, but still nothing. And so I felt that I'd done enough. I said to God, look, I've done enough. Now it's up to you. I felt rather suicidal. And to, overcome that, I became what would be called now an existentialist, a beatnik, if you like, and was influenced by Jack Kerouac and his book On the Road, in which, as you know, that movement rebelled against the if you like, the bourgeois pattern of college, job, career, kids, mortgage, pension, death. And people like Kerouac, showed that there was more to life than that. And so off I went. Well, I did graduate, and I would like to, as an aside, remind any young people who are watching this and attempted to drop out. Education is the key. Pink Floyd have a song, "We don't need no education." That's bullshit. You really need education. It's the key. Education is the right kind, of course, not conditioning. So if you're thinking of dropping out, although a gap year is now very acceptable, try and get your education. Unless you're Bill Gates, you need that qualification. So anyway, off I went in early 66 to Istanbul in Afghanistan, where I met a group of what were later called hippies. And we lived on an island in Istanbul. A lot of weed was smoked. But I started thinking about God again. As a young man, you in the West, normally your thoughts would drift to girls and sex, but in Asia, it seemed that my thoughts would drift to God. I got as far as Afghanistan, through Eastern Turkey, Iran, and to Afghanistan, and I love that country. There's something about those Afghan people that's proud. Before they were messed up by civil war, the Russian invasion, the Taliban, the American invasion. But it is a special place. There is something in the air, I think, in that Pamir knot, Turkestan, Afghanistan. Anyway, running out of money, I had to come back. And I came back via Istanbul again, but then I traveled to Paris with a French girl I met who was quite an impressive person, a real existentialist. We were both existentialists, and we ended up in Paris on Bastille Day, which was a marvelous experience where the French celebrate their liberation and tyranny. Then I headed to London, back to Coombe Springs. I was ready for Subud again. Yeah, I'd had spiritual influences. Going to Coombe Springs, what did I see? Building site. And all gone. And I later found out that John Bennett, the big honcho of Subud, a very good man, a very great man. I will never denigrate that man. But he'd been fooled by a Sufi called Idris Shah, who had claimed to be the successor of Gurdjieff, and Bennett was persuaded to sell Coombe Springs to Idris Shah. Idris Shah promptly sold it to a property developer, made a lot of money, and went off and bought his own place in Tunbridge Wells. But I started going to Subud Central London, which was a remarkable group, very remarkable group. In Monmouth Road, there were some good helpers again, and some good members. And the problem with making lists like this is that you leave people out. But I would like to mention Mohammed Ridwan Ishaq, a helper who was very kind, a very, very wise person. He really helped me. And Oliver Bolville, Mr. England, some really good characters, Rashid Arthur, Suman owes a lot to Rashid. He's a bit of an unsung hero, rather sensitive man, retiring man. But because of his efforts to preserve the paper archives, we still have the Subud archives, and they were moved to Kenfield Hall. And I started working in Kenfield Hall, going down just once a month for a weekend with my librarian background. I've got a librarian qualification by that time. And so I was involved with the Subud archives, but of course I'm jumping ahead.
That's okay. But so that was Kenfield Hall where you
Yes.
worked on the archives.
Yes.
Was this also around the same time when you first met Aji?
Yes, it was. And again, we're jumping and we can go back later on. But as he was around in the late 70s, he came to Britain and he was such a character. Uh, where I've heard that wherever Aji went, he'd been to Japan. He was quite well known, of course, in Indonesia, and he had what he called his Naughty Boys Club. He said his mission, if you like, was to help people who were stuck in the Latihan, who had, say, marital problems. He said, I wasn't sent for, people who were pretty regular and didn't have too many problems. And he did help a lot of people. He certainly helped me. My Latihan was sort of stuck. And doing Latihan with Masaji, something was open. And he gave me a lot of advice. Once we walked back from Kenfield Hall to Canterbury, 5 miles at night, and he talked and talked. A lot of it was above my head, but it later seemed to go in. And I think we've shared stories about Masaji before, but I see him as Suwood's jester, which is a very key position, like Bob Dylan is the jester of rock and roll. Um, I think there's something healthy about a movement which has a jester, someone like Masaji, who will ask the awkward questions. He's not always right. He can be controversial, but he keeps us sane. And I think another feature of the normality of Suwood is his humor. Wherever, like say you and I meet, a group of Suwooders, we have a good laugh.
Yeah.
About Suwood as well.
Yeah.
It's not something
Yeah,
mechanical.
that sounds very healthy. And you went to the 1971 Congress in Jalandhar, didn't you?
I did. I had already been accepted as a librarian. I'd got my degree previously in political theory in institutions, but then I needed a profession. So I'd studied. I'd been accepted at Liverpool Polytechnic for a one-year course, postgraduate course on librarianship. Um, and we were all, a lot of us in Suwood, UK, Suwood, Britain, were dreaming of going to Chilandak. It was the first time a World Congress had been held in Suwood's birth country. I had a return ticket. I got a return ticket from Chilandak to London by buying it from a Suwood member called Rupert Cunningham, who had decided he was going to stay on in Chilandak. So he sold me his return ticket. So for the outward journey, I had a student chartered flight to Bangkok, and also I spent some time in Suwood, Bangkok, with people like Hassan Bogle, a real Suwood warrior. I took the train down to Malaysia, hitchhiked across Malaysia to Singapore, or in Malaysia, I stayed a few days with Kirpal Singh of the Suwood Kuala Lumpur group, did Latihan in Suwood, Singapore, went over on the ferry to Tanjung Pinang, which is the island closest to Singapore. I got a local flight to an island called Belitang, and I was running out of money, but fortunately met some tin experts. Belitang is a tin mining island, and they needed someone to courier some letters to Jakarta. At that time, the Indonesian post was not reliable, so it was a win-win situation. They paid my own fare to Jakarta, and I took their letters and delivered them. However, I landed in the domestic airport in Jakarta, and at the international airport, there would have been a Suwood reception committee for all the overseas guests. They would have been put in a taxi. So I thought, well, I didn't have much money. I'm going to get it. There must be buses across the city. So I was in a bus, and outside an elderly Indonesian, about 40, he said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Chilandak. No, he said, this bus doesn't go to Chilandak. Come with me. And he took me by Block M, put me on the bus. We went on the bus to the gates of Wisma Suwood. And I turned around to thank him, and he'd gone.
Hmm.
I like to think he was an angel. Again, it may be an ego trip, but he certainly was an angel to me.
Mm.
But it was quite funny because then I home at last.
Yeah.
And going into the compound, and we're all this military around because it was the afternoon President's Hatos state official opening of some. But I was there for a month, and it was a marvelous experience, Harris. It was wonderful.
And a lot of people say that that 71 Congress was the best of all. Was it a great experience for you?
Yes, it certainly was. Malcolm Wildsmith, who also attended there, he said he called it pivotal. Something happened. The bank was set up. Was a lot of bonding. We experienced the very deep, rich Indonesian culture, the wayang, but also the friendliness of the Indonesians. There were these little coffee bars, with stuff I'd never drunk before, like Searsack juice. I was thinking, like a Marlon Brando film of the tea house of the August moon, the mystic Orient, away from the greasy spoons and the northern mists that I'd come from. I also had a trip up to Puncak, and I am a romantic, and I wandered in the hills above Bapa's farm in Puncak, and I thought, I'm coming back. I wrote a poem all about that. And
And
then
did you come back?
I did come back. I went back to Liverpool to do my library course, postgraduate library course, and then afterwards I was accepted as a VSO, voluntary service overseas, as a librarian in Bandung, Indonesia, which is the third largest city up in the mountains. I was there for 2 years. It was great. I met my present wife, Sri, but we couldn't get married for all kinds of reasons. Her mother was very suspicious of, Western playboys. We had a bad reputation. And but we kept on writing to each other. That is a very long, complicated story, Harris, but it does show that if God wants something to happen, it will happen.
Mm.
So I had the 2 marvelous years in Bandung, and then came back to the sad 70s in London. I know you're friends with Peter Jenkins, and he lived in a place called St. Quintin's Avenue in London. Well, that was in the 60s. And I know he was involved. You told me you were all involved in the same sort of music that we were involved in the 60s. But in the 70s, Britain went through a decline, and it was rather sad. And we were in this St. Quintin's Avenue, this flat. So I was there for 4 years, and then and I had some good jobs, and that was when I was working down at the Seward Archives in Kenfield. I met Masaji. And I got a very good job in Saudi Arabia at a place called King Khalid Military City. Now, the Saudis were building these cities out of it was oil money, rich with oil money. And they were building a city up in the northeast, if you can imagine a sort of oblong-shaped map of Saudi Arabia. So you in the northeast corner, it was up against Iraq and Iran. So they had this garrison city in case there was trouble on those borders. And a vast new city was being built.
And what was your job? What was your job?
A libraries supervisor. Because it was a cost plus contract, they could afford a library, we were building a chain of libraries, recreation libraries mainly, to keep the troops happy. American Army, keep the troops happy, give them all the food they need, all the entertainment, videos, and the books. So we were building libraries.
So you did that for 4 years, did you say?
No, 2 years, nearly 2 years.
And how was it, just from the point of view of Subud and the Latihan, to be in Saudi Arabia?
It was interesting. I was, of course, doing Latihan on my own. There were no Subud members in King Khalid Military City, but on the coast, in a place called Jubail, there was Rashid Rogers, Subud. So I used to go to him, and we do Latihan in his place, but not really. I don't think the question of how the Wahhabi regime views Subud is. I think there are some. It's actually the Prince of Oman, and I'm going off at a tangent here, of course, but the Prince of Oman of all those Arab sheikhs, he is very sympathetic towards Subud. Yeah. So I was doing Latian with Rashid in Jubail, but that was all I would do on my R&Rs. We would get R&Rs every 4 months. And on my first R&R, I came to Indonesia, turned up in Bandung and met Sri. We got engaged and it was wonderful. And her mother, who is quite a remarkable lady and was praying, and apparently she saw me coming. So before she had opposed Sri and I getting married, and this time it was all right. So on the second R&R, we got married in Bandung.
So,
But I had to
and
go back.
you've lived a lot of your life since then in Bandung, haven't you?
Yes, since probably since our daughter was born, our daughter Rianti. We've got two children, Munadi and Rianti. And Rianti was born in 83. And I had I was working there at Bandung International School as teacher librarian. I was there nearly 20 years. So after having like several jobs, like staccato jobs, I stayed in Bandung and my kids were educated there. And I
Uh,
was going to school in Bandung, yes.
Rianti is something of a celebrity in Indonesia, is that right?
Yes, she always was very outgoing. And I have to say, although I'm her dad, she is a very, very beautiful girl, physically beautiful. And but she's a great girl. She's a very kind-hearted, very. She's got none of these. She hasn't got all the celeb. She's avoided a lot of these, celebrity temptations. And she started off as a model, then she became an MTV presenter and presenter on the equivalent of American Idol, who's Indonesia's Got Talent.
I see.
And she's done, various presentation jobs. Acting, she's been in some movies. She was in the uh, one of the most popular Indonesian films for Ayat Ayat Cinta. She was in that. So she's quite a well-known name here.
Okay, so getting back to your Subud life, you're living in Indonesia, so you must have had plenty of opportunities to go to Wisma Subud. Were there contacts with Bapak? Do you have any good Bapak stories for us?
Um, uh, I've only met Bapa like formally twice. The first time was with Sri, and it was when I'd come back from Saudi, and we had bought some land in Kalimantan. We actually were the first to buy. We had plot number one, plot number two, and I think Tuti brought us in to see Bapa in the Wijoyo building, and he's such. I mean, he's just humble, so humble. And I think he knew that Sri was pregnant, so he said, cepat dapat anak. He said, get children quickly. But I think he knew that Sri was already pregnant. So just just cosmic, metacosmic, but with a simplicity of none of these this guru, great guru. The second time again was we just met him. I think we wanted to meet him, and Masaji said, "Well, just wait outside. Wisma Subramanian is going out." So only two specific occasions when I've actually met Papa like that. But of course, doing sumkum after Ramadan, stuff like that. Yeah.
Did you also continue your close relationship with Masaji?
Yes, in Indonesia, and he came in the late 70s. But then when I was in King Khalid Military City in Saudi in the first contract, uh, this is an experience I've written about in the old Subud Journal. I went on the Hajj, and uh, we were the climax of the pilgrimages on Mount Ararat, Arafat, where the tradition, you stand and you pray, and it was where the Prophet gave his final sermon. But it was crowded, and there was at least 1 million people, all dressed identically, doing the same thing, and it was very, very crowded. So I was coming down from Ararat with a group of Hajis, and there was another greater group coming up. There was barbed wire on one side, there was a chasm on the other. Now, you've probably experienced many people in Britain have experienced, football crowds, or rugby crowds. This was 10 times over the crowds. And there was no way, I thought, well, this is it. I'm going to die, I'm going to be crushed. So I just went into Latihan and prayed, and there came Baba and then Masaji. And I just felt like Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, Akbar, I shouted. And I sort of led a group of pilgrims to safety, minus my prayer mat, my shoes, but so that was the closest I've ever been in a war. But it was the closest I've ever been to physical death. So Masaji was there in spirit, I think. Yeah.
Okay, I think that may be a good place to end because we're surely going to run out of
Yes.
time, and we
Yes.
can continue this interview on another time.
Yes.
So I'll stop the recording now.
Yes. I'd just like to say I really appreciate it. And it's really good to be talking to you because it was 20 years ago in Melbourne that we last spoke, although we regularly email the buddies. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
it's been very good
God bless.
to talk to you.